to Higher TV, and I'm Kiara Montero. In our community, we've seen the rise in food insecurity and how it has impacted some communities more than others right here in the Bronx. Mott Haven Fridge saw the need to fight against this and has been doing so successfully from the start of the pandemic up until today. Joining us now is Daniel Zauderer, a Larchmont native and co-founder of Mott Haven Fridge. Thank you for coming to the show, Dan.
Thank you so much for having me, Kiara. I really appreciate it.
Of course, we're glad to have you here. So starting Mott Haven Fridge during the pandemic was crucial. As a teacher, you saw that in the community there was a lack of food provided to these families. Even after the pandemic, we see that how essential the fridge still is. Would you have expected for the community fridge to make the impact the way it has?
You know, when I started this work, it was a passion project of a middle school teacher. You know, I was a middle school teacher in the South Bronx, working to address a problem that I saw locally amongst my students and their families. And I was really only focused on that immediate problem. I wanted to get fresh and healthy food into the hands and stomachs of families that weren't getting access to that food in other ways. And you know, I didn't really think about what the long-term impact would be, or whether or not it would be something that lasted after the pandemic. I was just a teacher trying to do right by his students and his families. So, you know, I guess it's only, I guess they say foresight is, what do they say? 2020, whatever that expression is. You know, that I definitely couldn't have predicted it because it wasn't on my mind. You know, I never thought I'd be running a nonprofit or that I would leave my teaching job to focus on this.
You know, that's incredible. I feel like at the time you saw a large issue and then it turned into something much bigger. It became bigger than you, and you're continuing to do the work for others who are unable to do so, and really like touching lives of so many people in our community. So.
Yeah, I would only challenge that a little bit and say that it's not about doing for, but instead it's about trying our best to empower with resources. And so in our work, we are super intentional about connecting our volunteers with community citizen activists, with people that have their boots on the ground and that have a pulse on their community members. And those are the people that we rely on to distribute food to their communities. You know, so we're not directly in the food assistance direct to neighbors world so much as we are in getting food from where there's too much of it, where there's an excess, to community leaders that are rooted in communities that don't have enough of it. And then they're the ones who have the autonomy to figure out how to empower their own communities.
So since starting Mott Haven Fridge, how many pounds of food have you rescued since then? Like,
just having 2 community fridges to meet the local needs of the Mott Haven community. First of all, they weren't even sufficiently meeting the needs of Mott Haven, but it also showed that it was a much wider citywide issue. And so we started to think about how can we rescue food on a more global scale. And what I mean by rescue is that there's excess unsold produce at the end of the week from big wholesalers. And we work with one wholesaler in particular who's super generous in the Hunts Point produce market. And we pick up that food by truck, and then we drop off, we take that food and we hold it in a parking lot overnight with the refrigerator on. And then the next day we've got a bunch of people. You've been to this, Kiara, actually. We have a bunch of people that come in their vehicles and pick up that food and then bring it to different destinations. And that happens every Friday night into Saturday. We rescue the produce on Friday by truck. And then on Saturday, we distribute it to all of our volunteer drivers. And through that program alone, working with Katzman Produce, who's our amazing partner in the Hunts Point market. Yay, Katzman Produce. Give them a shameless plug here, because they've been so amazing to us in so many ways. We have rescued over 400,000 pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables since we've done that specific program of picking up from Katzman produce in a truck and bringing it to our parking lot where we distribute it to our drivers who bring it to different community sites. And that's only on Saturdays. So only through Katzman and only on Saturdays, we've rescued a little over 400,000 pounds of produce.
Yeah, that's incredible. Because if not, like these food items will be going to waste. But like instead, you're able to feed families that really need the food assistance.
Yeah, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, to be fair. And so, before we came along, Katzman already had donation partners. So they would donate the produce to City Harvest or to Food Bank New York City. And these are amazing organizations that have been around for decades and that have fleets of trucks and that are feeding people at a huge scale. But what happens when you get so big is that some people fall through the cracks. And one of the things that I discovered in my research on food insecurity is that only 1 out of 4 experiencing a food emergency are turning to a food pantry for help. And so, while the food, it's not fair, it wouldn't be fair of me to say that before the food was wasted, because it was still going to other nonprofits that are doing great work. But by working with us, Katzman is able to make sure that the produce that they're not able to sell is able to get into hyper-local, community-powered locations that are beyond the confines of the institutional food pantry. And so I think that that's the innovation here is how do you reach people that aren't getting access to food in other ways?
Right. So with that being said, what would be your vision moving forward for Mott Haven Fridge? Because we've seen it evolve since when you started it at the start of the pandemic, and it's continued to grow. So where are you guys going moving forward?
Yeah, a lot of the future is uncertain. And I say that because I'm always learning new things. I'm always being put in touch with new, amazing community partners and new, amazing community leaders. And I think in many ways that our community partners are really one of the heartbeats of this work, because they, like, for example, we work with, I don't know, maybe 20 different New York City housing authorities, developments. And each of those housing authorities has a residents association, and each residents association has a president, right? Who's a resident, a person of color, usually, who's deeply rooted in their community, who's lived there for many, many years, that has a pulse on what their neighbors need. And I take a lot of my cues from them, so as I learn more from community leaders, it informs our own approach. And so I think, in general, when we're speaking generally about vision, I believe that there should be community-powered food access sites that we can help to facilitate throughout the city, throughout the entire city, because we all need to be in this together. It needs to be something that's community driven. It needs to be something that we all roll up our sleeves and work together on, and again, I think that the work of Food Bank and City Harvest and some of the other major players in this space is incredible. They've moved something like 110 million pounds of food last year. We moved 400,000, so not even half of 1% of what they've done. But through this work, and you can see even on my shirt, it says neighbors helping neighbors, right? Through this idea of neighbors helping neighbors, and through insisting that everybody has a role to play in fighting food insecurity, I think we can feed so many more people and do it in a way that empowers everybody involved. So really, I guess the vision is to make neighbors helping neighbors the rallying cry around which people unite to fight food insecurity. And because people need to realize, and they can realize, and they can be empowered to realize that, you don't need to be like me and leave your job as a teacher to do this work. you just need to take an hour a week or an hour every other week, or
contributing in the smallest ways can go a long way.
Exactly. I'll give you a great example of that. Every Saturday when we do our big volunteering project, and we do it at 19, by the way, for anybody that wants to come volunteer, we'd love to welcome you. That happens at 1957 Turnbull Avenue, Turnbull Avenue. And it's in the Castle Hill Soundview area of the Bronx. It's actually right behind a Burlington Tote Factory and a shopping center parking lot. And yeah, and so every Saturday I invite people to bring in like extra coins that they have. Because sometimes we have nickels and dimes and quarters lying around, right? And we never use them because we don't want to carry around change. And so I invite families to bring in these coins, and then we have our kid volunteers sort through them and put them into coin rolls and things. And I just brought those coins alone. We made over $800 of just coins from people bringing their coins, their leftover coins in from their house. And so that really speaks to the idea that what you think is little adds up to really make a major change. And I just think that the more that I can be a vessel for that message, and the more that I can, it's one thing to talk about it, and I always tell our volunteers, without you, neighbors helping neighbors is just a corny catchphrase, right? It's you that turns it into something. And so what my job is to make sure that it's as easy for you as possible to get involved. And so that's my mission. And so anything that I can do, anything that we can do to get people involved, is something that's part of, that's very much, deeply connected to the work that we do. It's just empowering people to be involved in this fight.
Yeah, like you mentioned, it really takes a village to get this done. Let's say if someone wanted to stay connected with Mott Haven Fridge, how would they do that?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. For a volunteer-powered movement, we definitely are always looking for volunteers to join our amazing community of volunteers. And the best way to get involved is to just go on our website, which right now is Mott Haven Fridge, MOTTHAVEN Fridge.com. And you can go there and click on volunteer and find a Saturday that works for you to come join one of our pack and sort days. If you're not available on a Saturday, you can reach out to us directly, and we will hook you up with a community location where you can, help to do work during the week. And then also, and I'll let you in on a secret before. This is the first time that I've mentioned this on the media, actually. But we, by September, I hope, I'm not sure, but we are changing our name to Grassroots Grocery. And this is our icon here. This little G.
Really cool logo.
Oh, thank you. And I think that this alone, it speaks to the evolution of our work, because we started out as just a teacher's passion project, working with fellow teachers and with the community to fight it, to address a hyper-local need. And through all of you, everybody watching, through all of our volunteers, our financial supporters, people in high places as well that help to make this possible, we're able to do so much more. And I think that no matter what, we're always focused on people. I'm super passionate about this remaining a volunteer powered program. And so that idea of being grassroots, that grassroots in the Grassroots Grocery is super important to me. So I'm only saying that because if motthavenfridge.com doesn't work for whatever reason, eventually you can try grassrootsgrocery.org, and you might find some more information there.
Well, you guys heard it here first. Thank you so much, Dan, for joining us today, talking to us. It's always great having you. That's it for the segment of Higher TV, and I'm your host, Kiara Montero. Welcome to Higher TV, and I am your host, Kiara Montero. In our South Bronx community, combating air pollution has become a matter of life or death. Evidently, communities of color are disproportionately suffering with the recording of extremely high asthma rates, which are now 8 to 12 times higher than the national average. Our upcoming guest has continued to fight for environmental justice in our Bronx community. Joining us now is Assemblywoman Nathalia Fernandez for the 80th District and current candidate for New York State Senator. Thank you for coming to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
So, what policies can be enforced to fight against these environmental injustices in our Bronx community?
Well, air pollution has been an issue for decades, and one big policy push that thankfully has finally reached the levels of Chuck Schumer's attention, thanks to our Congress members who have brought it to his attention, including Congressmember Richie Torres, is capping the Cross Bronx. It's been an idea that has been thought about for generations. We know the Cross Bronx Expressway goes right through the South Bronx. In some areas, it's above our communities. In some areas, it's right there below our communities. You know, the expressway is sunken in right there down the road. So putting a literal cap on top would block a lot of those emissions that the cars are producing, the idling traffic from coming into our communities. And it would allow us to bring more green space with more trees, grass to help purify our air. So that is a big proposal that is out there, as well as addressing the contaminated ground. We put some money into addressing the brownfields that are in the Bronx and around New York State. And what brownfields are land masses that have been, well, I guess, excavated land that has been filled in by anything, trash, other contaminated dirt, whatever material to build out the land to continue to build our buildings and communities and infrastructure. And this contaminated land is seeping into the non-contaminated land. So investing in monitoring those brownfields, stopping any spread of contamination and any contamination to the people around these brownfields is something that we're looking at.
Okay, so how do you plan to get the Environmental Bond Act to be implemented in the Bronx to transform our neighborhoods? What would that timeline look like?
Well, that timeline, of course, I want to see as soon as possible because we do need help here in the Bronx. And if it works out again, this legislative session, you know, we made a lot of progress last year, then we want to see the effects and the resources of the Environmental Bond Act come right into our communities. And for me, looking at the 34th Senate District, there is a big coastal community, and we want to see how we can invest in protecting those communities, not only from natural disasters and building that resiliency, but also helping the natural protections that is already there. The Environmental Bond Act could go towards fulfilling the seawalls that have been proposed and started to build, you know, to stop any hurricane effects, but also in strengthening the oyster reefs that have started around our Bronx coastlines, the salt marshes that have been diminishing over the years. You know, salt marshes are natural barriers of sediment and animal life and natural life. oyster reefs, literally taking the oysters that we eat at restaurants and putting them back into the oceans, of course, being cleaned and contaminated, decontaminated, putting them back in the oceans to create natural environments for oysters to grow. And if it's unknown to many, oysters are an animal that literally purify their environment. So with the buildup of oysters in our water spaces, we can clean our waters, protect the erosion on our coastal lines, and protect our communities from possible natural disasters. And that investment can also go into building that resiliency to our homes on the coastlines.
Speaking of, you did mention like coastlines, and how do we get our community to engage with your Climate Infrastructure Act? Because we have seen a lot of flooding in the City Island area. We've seen a sinkhole in Morris Park. How do we get our community to come on board and support this act? How can it bring about change for us?
Well, those two examples that you mentioned are the ways to make it important to the individual. A lot of the policy that has been proposed, sometimes people don't really take interest in it, or it doesn't stick in their mind because they don't feel the impact on themselves. And that's how we do need to educate why certain policy plans and proposals need to be supported and need to be understood, because one way or another, if it's not affecting you, it's affecting somebody else. So yes, we're suffering from flooding every rainstorm that we have here, and that stops our transportation, that ruins our homes, that puts now an extra budget that we have to pay to fix the destruction that happened. The sinkholes literally causing a danger where cars are falling into, maybe like the threat of someone getting hurt and falling into a sinkhole is now so great because they're happening more frequent and they're getting bigger. So putting these examples, say that again?
They're getting closer and closer to our neighborhoods.
Exactly. So that urgency that we can see that affects us helps to carry the conversation around our communities up to Albany, to our legislators, to really make sure that we're taking serious action to relieving these issues.
So how can replacing standard streetlights with LED lights or reduce our greenhouse gas emissions for the Bronx? How can it help our high asthma rates?
Well, okay, so a lot of the pollution that is causing our asthma rates does come from the emission of the power that we're using. And, it's been mentioned before, when it's a heat wave, lower the use of your electricity because it causes the overworking of the system, which causes heat, which then, adds to the greenhouse gas emission issue. And in the simplest, I guess, change that we can do in just changing the bulbs, we know that LED bulbs use less power. So imagine every light in the city, every light, every stoplight that's out there. If we change those bulbs, and there's probably a million, let's think about it. There's probably a million of those bulbs. And in changing every bulb to LED bulbs would create or would use less power, less energy to doing the necessary safety precautions that street lights do. So I think from there, we can see an effect that using LED lights can utilize less energy, thus putting less emissions out there.
Yeah, and it's also a start for something greater that could come after this. Like, it's literally one step in the right direction.
Like such a simple, small step.
But it's something that our community desperately needs, because we've seen so many impacted by it. Me personally, extremely high asthma rates. That's something I suffer with. I see my family suffer with. And it's how, we can have all these medical solutions, but it's it also starts with our environment. And what are we really doing to take care of our environment? I actually did see earlier in the summer, you had an incredible turnout for your Green Day of Action at Bronx Park East. And I would like to know, are there any upcoming events like this that are happening in our community moving forward?
Yes, these events happen very often. And, I'm very happy to organize from my office, incorporating numerous groups and volunteers, because as much help that we can give to our green spaces and our parks is needed. Our Parks Department is doing the most, and they really do try to address every issue that we present to them. But as humans and park goers, we have a responsibility as well to make sure that we're setting an example to those around us that, yes, you could be in the park, have fun, enjoy your time with your family, but clean up after yourself. So while I don't have anything in the next month or two lined up, I encourage everyone to please look at your local parks and see if there's a park group. Many of our bigger parks do have them. In my district, we have Friends of Mosholu Parkway and Friends of Pelham Parkway. Pelham Bay Park has a Friends of Pelham Bay Park. There's the Bronx River Alliance. So there's so many organizations that make efforts every single day and have volunteer opportunities every single day to help reduce a lot of the pollution and I guess, things left over in the park that we see. So please look for those organizations, follow them, support them, because they're doing the work every day, even when I can only do it once a month.
Yes, definitely. And this is how we can contribute working with these organizations. Also, congratulations on your recent decision to run for New York State Senate. So if elected, what laws should have priority once you're in that seat?
Great. Yes. Well, to this discussion, we want to see the Living Shorelines Act enacted. We need to see public renewables finally passed in both houses and become law, because these are continuing steps to creating this green infrastructure, to creating this new environment and new effort of resources to the areas that we're seeing has not gotten the attention that it should over the years. So those are certainly two areas that I want to continue to push towards, and bringing funding to fix the infrastructure in my district. Aside from the policy in the budget, that's just as important to make sure that we're really bringing back the tools to help strengthen our communities. And I really want to bring a streamline of effort towards the infrastructure in our community, to stopping the water, the sinkholes from happening, to reducing the flooding, to looking at our sewage system. This is going to be a partnership with all members of government, city and state. But I think it's certainly an effort that we need to take strongly, because the flooding and the backing up of our sewage systems is causing runoffs into our natural waterways, and also runoffs and backups into our homes. That's putting a great burden on our community members.
Well, we're definitely looking forward to seeing this. I hope you have a great run during your campaign. Ms. Fernandez, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate having you here at BronxNet.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having this conversation. Truly important to speak about it as much as we can.
Yes, of course. That's it for this segment of Higher TV. I am your host, Kiara Montero.